everyone. Welcome to the Moviemantz Q&A. I'm your host, Scott Mantz. The name of the show is Next, and it airs at 9 p.m. on Tuesdays on Fox. And it is about a tech billionaire, former CEO, who teams up with a Homeland Cybersecurity Agent to stop rogue artificial intelligence. Let's take a look.
There's an AI loose in the world.
Tailor-made to get rid of us.
It's in cameras, cell phones, anything with a lens, a mic, or a sensor. Something's wrong!
We need to find Next and kill it.
You see where I'm going with this?
Not in the slightest.
This guy's your boss.
Paul, that's not helpful.
And joining us right now to talk about Next on the Moviemantz Q&A, he is the Emmy-winning composer of 24 and Jessica Jones, Sean Callery. Hi, Sean.
Hey, Scott. How are you? Good to be here.
Great to have you here. Also joining us, he plays Ted LeBlanc on the show. He is also a SAG Award nominee along with the cast of Ozark, Jason Butler Harner. Hi, Jason.
Hey, Scott. Thanks so much for letting us be with you today.
Oh, great to have you here. And the script is the thing. Welcome, Emmy winner for 24, creator and executive producer of Next, Manny Cotto. Hi, Manny.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure. It's a lot of fun.
The pleasure is definitely mine because I've been a fan. Just full disclosure, big Star Trek fan. So big fan of Enterprise. And, I just got to know, why was Next the next step for you after all that time on 24?
Well, it's really just these things crop up because of what you're passionate about. And there's really kind of very little rhyme or reason why we do things, except we're just excited about them in the moment. I know, for Next, there was a couple of things that happened that made me, want to tell this story. And one of them was a real life event, which happened with my son. I have 4 kids and I have 4 Alexas in the house. And my kids use them constantly. They're one in each room, because I got one for one, and then suddenly the others want theirs, and so now there's all over the place. I never know what I'm being listened to. But anyway, one morning, my son looked particularly tired, and I said, "What's the matter?" And he said, "Well, at 3 a.m. or midnight or whatever it was, Alexa started talking by itself." I actually said the dialogue that's in the show. I said, Alexa doesn't talk by itself. It just answers questions. And he said, "Well, I don't know. It just started talking, and I had to get up and tell it to shut up." So that stuck with me. I never got to the bottom of what happened. I don't know if we accidentally set an alarm, or if he imagined it, or what happened. But it stuck with me because it reminded me of those gothic horror story moments where an adult is walking down a corridor and hears voices coming from the kids' room, opens the door, and the daughter is talking to nobody. And you say, "Who are you talking to?" "I heard voices." "Oh, it's the little lady that visits me every night." It's like one of those moments. And so that kind of stuck with me, that we have this technology and we don't really, fully, and we've invited into our homes that we don't fully have complete control over. And the second thing was that there was suddenly, all of these articles about people like Elon Musk and Stephen Hawking, who were warning about the very real possibility of an artificial intelligence catastrophe. That is, we finally achieve artificial intelligence, general artificial intelligence, which would then get out of control, become super intelligence, and could possibly destroy us. And so these two things, the idea that these really smart people were actually warning about the real possibility of this, coupled with what happened with my son, kind of grew into this idea. And plus, I had 24 in my blood, so I immediately said thriller, and it felt like this was the makings of at least a kind of a pulse pounding thriller that and a character story that would be perfect, and something you get obsessed with these things and you can't get them out of your mind. And ultimately it happened. I mean, I was so obsessed with it, I actually wrote it on spec. I didn't really even go out and pitch it. I just wrote it. And we sold it.
Wow, that was daring. Obviously, you had a great idea, and it's something that resonates. And Jason, from when I was watching the first episode of the series, I immediately thought about how this is a warning and a cautionary tale. And I was wondering what your first thoughts were about Next.
Well, I mean, first of all, I was excited to get to meet Manny. And also, I'm also a fan of all of the things that you mentioned before. So I was excited for the possibility of getting to work with him and meet him. And then also with Glenn and John. And then listen, I don't have an Alexa or an Echo or any of those things in my house, but I obviously have a phone that I use a lot and other devices that record in various ways. So I'm very nervous about it. And I have a lot of friends with kids who I've said, don't you worry about that. You know, there was one of the early articles about how the Alexa transcribed something and just emailed it to everybody in this couple's email list from just their like evening conversation, which thankfully wasn't too incriminating for any of them because they really could have gotten in trouble. So I was excited because I'm nervous about tech. I'm nervous about the invasiveness of all of this stuff that makes our lives all so easier. So I was excited. And then I read it and was thrilled and got the idea of getting to work with John Slattery was also awesome. We've known each other casually in New York, but to actually get to act together was a great idea, and to be brothers and, you know, make jokes with each other or at each other's expense for a course of a season was extremely enticing.
Well, I want to get into just the dynamic of your brotherly relationship. And John's awesome, big fan from obviously from Mad Men. But Sean, I want to get your take on the material the first time that you read through it, and I also want to have hear about your first conversation with Manny about the direction musically that you were going to go with this.
Well, Manny, I don't think I ever told you this. First of all, I am such a fan of both these gentlemen. And when I read the script, first of all, I didn't know Jason was going to be cast as the brother. And I wish I could convey to you what happens when you read something on a script and you're like, oh, looks like a really interesting character and this looks like a really interesting story. And then the likes of John and Jason, then they get on screen, they actually execute. There is such a life that comes into you. I mean, it's such a privilege when you get a cut of the first cut of something and you're like, whoa, I mean, this is really just outstanding. And we were talking earlier that I've scored some music on other shows that Jason's been in. And so that's always just a real thrill when you finally see the page come to life in the pilot. But the day before Manny called me, my license plate was read by some AI in downtown LA that misread my license plate as being a stolen vehicle. And I was pulled over in a very, very serious fashion and escorted from the vehicle with guns drawn and stuff before it was diffused, before then I could prove that I had a car. So it was a little traumatizing, and it happened because of a random camera read, which happened as a technological thing. Anyway, the next day I was driving on the 210. I just remember this, and a police car was sort of in the distance, and I was naturally tense because what had just happened to me the day before. And the phone rings, and Manny's calling me on the cell phone. He says, "I got to, we're going to make this pilot." And Manny was so sweet. He said, "You're the first guy I called. I want you to score it." And we worked together on 24. And I got to know him not only as a person but as a storyteller. And so when he outlined the story, I got tremendously excited about it. And then when I read it, I got more excited. And it was a thriller. I mean, it was the Manny Cotto story, and it's the moment the first downbeat starts of the show, it's off, and the shows go by so fast when you watch them, and that's another sign of a really fun show. So. But that was my first moment.
Wow, you were right in the moment. It was very like meta. Manny, because of your obviously your inspirations here, obviously you worked on Star Trek, so you must have been inspired by some of the earlier Star Trek that looked at artificial intelligence, but also in HAL 9000 from 2001: A Space Odyssey. What were some of the elements of artificial intelligence from film, from TV, and from books that has resonated so strongly over the last 50 or 60 years and made it more relevant now?
Well, it's interesting. On this, for this show, I really kind of drew on the research that I'd done about artificial intelligence and really tried to kind of hew closely to how it would really comport itself and how it would behave and sound. But I got to tell you, the closest version, I mean, it ended up becoming, you know, a kind of a cousin of HAL 9000. I mean, you know, Stanley Kubrick, you know, did you know, vast amounts of research, and he, you know, he devised a computer, an AI that still sounds the most realistic to this day of any that and behaves the most realistically in any case. But you know, I think I've always been in love with robotics and AI, and I think this is going to be crazy. I think I was imprinted on it because I was a Lost in Space fan. And you know, the robot in Lost in Space never got out of my head. Warning, you know, it's never got out of my head. In fact, you know, I still lament that I don't have enough room for a full-size replica because I've always wanted one. I told my wife I'm going to get one, and but there's just no room for the darn thing. So I've not been able to get one. It's just one of those things you fall in love with as a kid and you can't get it out of your head. And so I do believe that has, you know, infected me. And so when I read about you know, flash forward to 2019, when I read about the fact that individuals really were afraid of this possibility of this happening, it really kind of, it just, you know, sucked me in. And what particularly was interesting, the challenge of this was to do an AI story where you didn't have robots, where you didn't have, it hewed very closely and to the technology we have today, with an AI that is determined to kind of keep its presence secret, so that it has to go, it is trying to go after only those people that know it exists, and it's doing it in such a way that it can have plausible deniability, meaning it might not have been an AI. So it became instantly a character piece because it had to go after these individuals on a personal level, on a personal basis. So that was the challenge, and I think the fun, and what I think made this different, because, you know, there's been a lot of great movies and TV on artificial intelligence, and the only reason to do one was to do, I think, something like this, which is a different kind of look about how, really kind of sitting down and saying, how could this really unfold and what would it look like? And so that's really how it came about.
Jason, one of the things that struck me, and the tone of the series is set right away in the first episode, the pilot, so to speak. And usually, like, pilots are difficult because they have to do so much. They have to set up the characters and set up the story, but still be an engaging standalone episode in their own right. I think the first episode of Next does that because it is about something global. It is about a cautionary tale, but it is also very personal because of the brotherly relationship. It is also, you know, you have the family of Agent Salazar, you know. So what struck you about not just the first episode, but all the episodes you've done so far, about how the series blends this big thing with this very personal thing too?
Well, that without question, and like no smoke being blown anywhere here, that obviously it comes from Manny, and it also comes from in terms of Glenn and John Rico and Glenn Ficarra, who directed the pilot, who they really set how we were going to do it, what the tone was going to be. Listen, an actor, anytime they read a script, you have you create an image of what in your head about how you think it's going to go, and you are nervous about the ways that it might go that you would prefer it didn't go, or what everyone's tastes are, or any of those things. I wasn't concerned that it wasn't going to be good. I was always concerned, well, I wonder how this is going to skew. And the thing that's so great, which we knew when we were shooting the pilot for sure up in Vancouver, and then also obviously with John, leading it so that the tone of the acting is definitely leading into just natural conversational, real flowing. And then the way John Rico and Glenn Ficarra shot it, there was a lot of times there were two cameras going for multiple scenes. So there was always movement happening, and natural movement, not just walk and talk for the sake of a walk and talk, like actual plot and character driven movement of camera and energy. And so you had that feeling when we were shooting it, and Manny was there, and tweaks that were happening on the day, on the spot, that would happen from writing, you know, for location reasons or whatever, just like really smart, economical expressions of exposition. And you're absolutely right, Scott, that in a pilot episode, you know, frequently as an actor, I know, before you shoot down, if you see a pilot that's like really laden with exposition, when you see it, I always want to see the second one, and then I really want to see the third one, because there's also a trap. I'm not a writer, there's also a trap where like the second episode is a complete rehash of the first for late coming viewers. And that also absolutely does not happen in this series. We go.
Yeah.
And you don't know this going into the series, but it's a compressed amount of the entire 10 episodes is a compressed amount of time, of calendar time. And I forget, Manny will know how many days it actually is. But so that 24 fantastic quill in his arsenal, or whatever you want to call it, that he has, it just is so effortlessly involved in the entire series.
I was really, really floored and immediately hooked because of that element, because it did feel like the second episode built on the first, instead of rehashing it or sort of like, starting to slow down or settle in. It was settled in from the beginning. And look, Sean, the music is something where your menace, your enemy, your villain isn't really there. You know what I mean? So how do you go about sort of giving a theme to a threat that is not physical,
Well, I don't dare compare myself, and I don't want to be compared to John Williams here, but the movie that really hid the villain for an hour and 15 minutes was Jaws. I mean, and you didn't see you didn't see the monster, but you knew the monster. And when I'm looking at a show for the first time in our spotting sessions, I really just pay attention to what happens emotionally. I watch it as a viewer. I watch it as a fan. So when someone gets into an elevator or something weird happens, like, God, I'm like, holy crap, we're connected. The elevator's connected to the world, or the GPS. So I get very delightfully sort of surprised. And I actually say, well, look, if I'm feeling that way, I'm going to bring that into the score. But with regards to Next, I mean, I think the physical, I want to be careful here because we're only 2 episodes in, but we saw the physical, the device in the lab and so forth. From the very opening of the episode where the car goes out of control and the lights go off in the convenience store, I was thinking of a sound. I thought there has to be some little sound that we could engage that would, at least at the very beginning, the viewer won't know it, but over the course of 10 episodes, I don't know if you can hear this. It's like a little bit of a, it has this little, and it doesn't happen all the time. It's just that when the AI is when the light goes off, or if there's a camera that happens, it's used very sparingly. And then there's some low drones and things. There wasn't a real sort of like, here's the next theme. Like there wasn't that kind of a lyrical thing. Although there are some themes for the people that we start to explore later on. And so it's funny, just talking about the pilot, to Jason's point about the people. It's like when I was working on Bones, I remember it was all about, solving mysteries. But one of the showrunners there said, people show up for the people. They show up because they care about what's going on with the characters, and what I salute Manny and Jason about doing is one of my favorite scenes in the pilot, such a small moment, but it's when your character, Jason, went to Salazar and said, look, my brother, you sort of made an appeal about what was happening to the brother. And there was so much communicated in that minute or so about how much he cared, even though they were they were sniping at each other, but you could, without real overt language, it was conveying the relationship. And I asked Manny, I said, look, I don't think we need to score that. Like, I don't think we need music in there. And we didn't. We kind of kept it like, very low. We kind of came out and then it came in at the end of it. So it's those kinds of things. The action in combination with caring about where the characters are going is why I think the show is so great, is why each episode sort of is its own bottle of wine, so to speak.
It's funny you should have mentioned that scene, because I remember when we were getting the pilot done, we had a little bit of time issues and somebody suggested cutting that. And I was like, over my dead body.
Yeah.
I love that scene.
Yeah. Now listen, I remember when I was watching, that was the scene where it tipped the scales in favor of the people that you're empathizing with. So yes, that was definitely the moment where, like, this is what the show is. So, but Manny, working with Sean again after all those years on 24, like, what was it, simple I could simply say, what was it like working together again? But really, what were the unique challenges that you and Sean faced in working together on Next to create a score that was going to be different?
Well, I mean, that's a hard question because I didn't working with Sean is never challenging. it's it's really one of the it's one of those moments, one of those aspects of production where, you know, you finish something and you give it to Sean and he brings it back to you. You know, there's actually, you know, either we have a shorthand or Sean just understands. But I mean, it happened on 24 as well. You know, we don't spot, or we didn't spot. We think we spotted the pilot, but in general, we don't spot. You know, usually you're going with a composer and you go, oh, I want music to start here, and with Sean, you just give it to him because there is just, and he just knows where it comes, where it belongs, where it doesn't belong, what to hit, what not, and you just simply sit back and you get back the score and you just marvel because he's hit all of those places that you needed to be hit and brought out things that you didn't even know needed to be brought out, and made, you know, the entire brought the entire episode up a completely different level. It happens every single time. It happened on 24. And you know, remember on 24, we get back episodes, we're like, holy mackerel, where did this episode come from when Sean would cut it? And so, I mean, when Sean would score it. And so it was really that, you know, I think we talked a little bit in the pilot about some ideas and themes, but really, I got to be honest, it was just simply, Sean, take it away. Because, you know,
I mean, you know, I remember the pilot. There's always debate about color, you know, and tone and execution, because there's a lot of ways to convey tension. You know, there's a lot of ways to convey action and so forth. And it's true, Manny and I, you know, I learned a couple things about Manny. For example, I didn't use a lot of woodwinds in 24, you know? And so the general discussion was that the color of the show was going to have sort of a clean kind of feeling in some of the tech areas, but then it started to, then as the story arcs, and that's really so important, because when I see Ted's the character, you know, your character Jason, you know, he goes through some stuff, and it's just when that arc happens, you know, you want the music to sort of organically respond to that. And one thing I really do, and this is not a blowing smoke thing, but I would write Manny sometimes and say, look, I'm going to try a little something exotic here or something, you know, and you've never ever once in the years we've been working together say, oh, you know, you always said, I'll listen to it. And that is not always the case with showrunners. Sometimes showrunners have a very ironclad vision of something, which is fine. I mean, you want to marry yourself to what they do, but I love that with Manny, he gives me and, you know, the freedom to really try things. And if something doesn't work, he says so. You know, there's no drama to it.
Yeah, Jason, I want to ask also, you know, working with Manny and like what makes Manny a great actor's producer, and especially when it comes to the dynamic between you and John, you know, your dynamic.
Well, I think the part that's great is that, you know, for instance, I do like to know a general idea of where things are going to go for a season. I don't need to know everything. I'm not that kind of a controlling actor, but I like to have a sense of where we think it's going to go. And we've all been doing this long enough that we know that, you know, inspiration comes on a holiday, and sometimes you got to dig deep for finding stuff for yourself, or you got to follow that juicy thing, you know? So I also know that when you start a season of the show, who knows who listen, for instance, in this one, I love this cast very much. Evan, the son, is an incredible talent, and look what he did in scene 2. It's I mean, in episode 2 alone, it's incredible. But similarly, my hope had been, I knew that things were going to reveal themselves throughout, so I didn't know all the way what was going to happen with Ted throughout the entire season, but I had some hopes, and then Manny kept surprising me. So you just know you're in good hands. You know you're in good hands when you shoot that scene, that moment of that scene in the pilot where I get to, you know, convey that I am concerned about my brother. So it's not just Cain and Abel here only, that's appreciated and rewarded and interested in being brought back up again, while not deterring from what we need for the tension of the show. You know, the stuff, Sean, the stuff, first of all, I'm not kidding. I don't know how I went to look at just to see just to be reminded of all the things that Sean's worked on. And I made a joke before we started filming this, but I'm going to say it again, which is it's a prolific amount of work, of genres. And I mean, the numbers of what you have created are estimable and formidable and impressive to me. There's a thing that you did in episodes 4 and 5, which have some big meaty stuff that happens for Ted. I'm always intrigued as we all keep doing this, the lessons that I learn of when you need to step on the gas, when you need to let off the gas. And I guess stepping into your kitchen a little bit, Sean, when part of being a composer, when silence is the absence of sound is your skill of recognizing when you need to let that be. Like it's the same thing, economy, same thing for Manny or for myself in terms of the recognition and the skill of letting something be less and tell us much more, or when there's a confusion, or maybe it could be a performance, it could be who knows what, that we need to give some more endowment here. So I really appreciate that, Sean, in 4 and 5, because I thought, I wonder how these are going to play out, particularly when I get in the car and all that stuff.
You know, this is I just want to throw this in here that because I'm stumbling over myself because I so want to talk about some of these things specifically, but I remember in the earliest days of 24, sometimes they would have an opening credit sequence in which you would have like 90 seconds with no one speaking, and then they would start the show. You know, it'd be like almost like the opening credits of a film. And then as we got into more content and streaming content and so much more to viewing, I noticed that the editing changed where you got right out of the gate and it was all conversational and all action. And I think it speaks to the confidence of Next that we had a couple of moments in that 4 and 5 where your character literally is doing something for the better part of 90 seconds, 2 minutes, and it's just you. I mean, it's just you, and it's riveting. And I'm not log rolling when I say it. I just you know, I love those scenes because you don't. Sometimes you get some things and you have to do CPR on them to make the. But with this was a show where you could say, wow, let's let this happen naturally, you know, and then musically just do the very bare minimum or nothing at all. I mean, to even have that choice as a composer is that's a real luxury, as I'm learning with my darker circles here. I can tell you that's.
Manny, what is your perspective on that trust for your composer, especially someone you've worked with for a long time, and you have this, maybe there's a second hand, there's a rhythm that you have, and maybe deferring to your composer when your composer wants something, when you want something a little different. You know, what do you do in those moments with Sean?
Well, the moments where I want something a little different are far and few between. I can probably count. There's like 3 times during the series. I can't honestly remember where we wanted anything different. I mean, it's always just it's always spot on. I wish I had something more.
There was our biggest moment in the pilot.
Yes, the pilot. Yeah.
Was when the computers fired up in the last 2 minutes of the sequence. There was a huge sound effects moment. And by the way, just to be kind of kismet about it, before I became a composer, I needed a night gig. So I was a sound effects editor on Star Trek Deep Space Nine. So I had to learn how to put sound effects, and you learned where sound tells the story, dialogue tells the story, music tells the story. And so we thought about, well, let's have no music when the thing fires up. And then he said, no, we need music. And I went a little full Monty with brass, and I kind of went really big. And who was there was a little bit of pushback. I forgot who it was.
That was actually, I liked it.
Yeah, you did.
But I got into an argument with John and Glenn, who didn't like it so much. And so we kind of, it was given. I mean, they really didn't like. They really thought it was too thematic. They thought it should be more horrific, and I loved it the way it was. So there were other arguments that I won, and so all right, fine, Sean, because they wanted it different. So we changed it. But
we found sort of a horror medium, which used sort of the sonority. But honestly, I like I thought that was a worthy fight. I mean, it didn't get ugly, but we sort of threaded a sound that I would not have found myself, and through the collective input of everybody, we found a good moment there. And that helped.
But I still miss that original cue. Da 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 da. You know.
It'll be on the soundtrack.
I'm so curious what happened.
We gotta do a soundtrack. We gotta put that alternate track on there.
Well,
I'm so curious what it's like when both of you are watching the edit and, you know, focusing on whatever you're focusing on, and when you watch things over and over again and weighing. And I'm sure, as is often the case, the no's are definite no's and the yeses are definite yeses. But usually I'm so curious about the process when you're in between deciding, like, oh, what does this do? What does this do? And how you have to, when you have to step away and go for a walk around the block to try to get a fresh set of eyes to see, like, oh no, this is the way. I'm so curious what that's like for you guys.
You just nailed my entire work. There's just a point where you just can't look at something. You can't think your way out of a block. You know, sometimes you just have to step back, which is extraordinarily hard to do sometimes, especially when you're that close, you know, and you want to go out to dinner with your wife, or, you know, you're that close, but then you have to come back and then you have to look at it. But then the moment you go away and come back, you immediately get more information. You may not have it right, but you know what it's not. You know, you can chip away at it. I think that's times 100 in the editing room. I could not picture it. I don't know how, Manny, I don't know how you
there was some, you know, a couple of these episodes had to be restructured in cutting. I mean, you know, it's not unusual. I mean, it's, you know, there's an old saying, it's you're really writing your last draft in the editing room. And some of them, episode 4 in particular was a monster. I'm really proud of that. And that was the well, actually, I don't know if it's aired yet, so I can't talk about it, but I'm really proud of that because it was a lot of stuff in one episode. And that was a monster. I had to, you know, that was a lot of walks and figuring out what scene should go where and adding a scene that we wrote. So my point is, yeah, it can become. There's some episodes that just come back perfect. Like episode 5 came in and the cut was like, and was just sailed. Other episodes need a little more tender loving care, and the ones because they just don't work. You know, you're just like something's off. And then some people, you know, I tend to just like treat it like another, just take it apart and then put it back together again. Forget for a second what you wrote and then just start all over again. And that happened on a few episodes, and that can be extremely difficult, but incredibly rewarding when you get it right. Because you're like, I saved that guy, you know. So it's but those are some dark days.
But on that note, Jason, that's actually a great question for you as an actor. What do you do when you're in a situation where whether you're rehearsing or you're prepping or you're in the middle of filming a scene and, you know, y'all can't quite get it? Do you take 5? Do you go for a walk around the park? Like, what do you do as an actor?
I mean, there's so many variables. I mean, obviously, if you're with another actor, there's them, right? You just have to go with what they're giving you first and foremost. Sometimes there's a thing that's happening where you just think, I still can get in my head about something and think, is this hokey or is this conveying enough? And then I'll try to focus a different take. I like trying to give, I like giving multiple, to the extent that the day allows, multiple versions of something to basically give, especially in the earlier episodes of the first season, to see what triggers, what excites, you know, everybody who's taking a look at the dailies to see, you know, it's important to me to give options. And then you start to know as it goes along, you know, especially in terms of with the other actors, there's different actors. Like I had a different way of working with John than I did with, say, I did a lot of work with Alian, who plays the coder, Serena. And she and I actually knew each other a little bit more. We lived near each other in LA, but it was the first time we acted together. So it was kind of fun to figure out that world. You know who was really great, by the way? It was the part that was a great thing. She's a Chicago actress who plays my wife, Sean Cross. She was great. And it was really fun because in the first time we meet her, she's, you know, making dinner and pouring wine, and we have a relatively simple, innocuous conversation. But then we just had a talk in the makeup room, and I had done a lot of theater, and I knew she had done a lot of theater and stuff. And I just said, like, listen, we can do whatever we want here. So let's lean into whatever we want in terms of what this couple is. And then it bears fruit later on in the series. But yes, sometimes it's a walk. If you can't take a walk around now we can't go anywhere on sets. We can't you have to stay in your zone. You can't go anywhere. So just a teeny little walk in a 6-foot block. But sometimes it's a walk, sometimes it's a game. I used to play a lot of, I got addicted to a lot of like Words with Friends and other things to be mind resets. And then I was like, now you're just thinking about playing great words on Words with Friends. You got to stop that.
Well, speaking of which, talk about, staying in your part of the set and part of the stage. What has it been like making this series during a pandemic? Manny, start with you.
Well, we got lucky in that we finished shooting, I think, 5 days or so before everything shut down.
Wow.
In fact, we were one of the first, we were the first production to have someone come down with COVID. But it was, and she's fine, and nobody else got sick, strangely enough. But it was at the time early on where that didn't immediately mean shutting down. It was more like, what do we do? But we kept shooting and we finished, thank God, barely. So it became a matter mostly of post, doing post remotely, and I it actually worked quite smoothly. I a little too smoothly, I think. I don't see a reason why I should ever go into the editing room again, because we were. The program now, I forget the name of the Evercast, I think it is, where you work with the editor while he or she cuts the show. You can do it right here, in the comfort of your home. What's interesting is that, and Jason, you can tell me, because I heard these stories, but I wasn't sure. Did you guys have to record your ADR like in a closet with your phone? Is that what I heard?
We actually did. Like I was so shocked because I'm looking at the closet right now. Yeah, we did it on various devices, computers, phones. Some people had mic setups, and I'm amazed. I heard one in one of the episodes where I was like, oh wow, I actually did record that in the closet.
Did you hear your original dialogue, or did you just sort of just do it wild and then they lined it up later? I mean, how did that?
It was a new line. It was a new line that I forget if it was a city or a nuance, something had changed, maybe a last name or something like that. So we just had to sort of, I heard the beginning and then added it in multiple times. I did it in a roll, and then you guys did your magic and made it sound the same.
Well, I heard that because that's, I never actually talked to anybody about it, because I know John had done it. So I figured everybody else did it, but that's the idea. I mean, everybody was we couldn't go into an ADR booth. That was gone. So if we needed new lines, which you always need on every show, replacing or whatever, adding lines, the actors had to kind of do it on their own, with their phones, closets, or what have you. The music mixes were done in the mixers' houses.
Yeah.
They mixed them and sent them to us. Sean did his stuff and sent them over. So it really just we all retreated to our little pods and kind of did our work, and it all came together. I mean, quite smooth.
Composers work mostly in isolation when they're writing anyway.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
COVID is a composer's sort of like, the world doesn't look that different when we're working, and we're fundamentally unhappy people in the studio. So we really sort of looked forward to going to mixed studios or an occasional mix session for the bagels or something, but that's all gone, so that we had to face just the raw it of our minds as it blew back to us. But no, what was interesting is I would spot the show with my music editor. It's true, Manny and I have the very unique position of not having this spot. That was a real gift, because if we had to spot the shows, we would have done it. We would have done it on Evercast or something. But the show was very music heavy, and we kind of knew what it was doing. And then, but then the mixing, the only real thing was everyone played back, and we realized this really quickly. Everyone plays back, on headphones, but not every set of headphones is created equal. So sometimes we were getting notes back like, man, that is way too loud. And then another person would say, no, I think it sounds just great. So I think we realized halfway through, and I'm not sure if we did this, we wanted everyone to use the same headphones when we were playing back the shows, and then everything kind of got equalized. So then when we got the notes, it was kind of like getting notes as if we were sitting on the stage together. So without the 40-minute drive to the Paramount lot. So I love seeing people. I do miss people, and I don't ever want that to go away. I do think, though, that some things are here to stay.
So too. I think so too.
Planning meetings are going to be like all of those Yeah, they're all going to be on these platforms. We are so lucky, though. I have so many friends, exactly as Manny said. We're so lucky. I think my last day was March 6th, and maybe the show wrapped on the 7th, something like that. That was like a Wednesday, Thursday, and then on Monday I flew back from Chicago to LA, and then on Monday everything was down. And I have so many friends that were mid-season that they are scrambling to try to get it done, and we all know this. It just with the listen, we're going to make it work. We're finding new forms of artistry also, given the constraints, as artists always do. But that said, we are adding time. It's so intriguing to go back. I have friends working in New Orleans right now to go back to something to try to complete it, and it's going to take so long just to finish the home stretch of a thing. It's such an interesting barometer artistically for everybody to just like finish this thing.
Like, there is something to be said about technology. Maybe it isn't so bad after all. Now, is it?
Oh, in this case, it saved our lives. I mean,
Yeah.
right now, my 4 kids are in the house learning, in middle school, each facing the screen. So, I mean, if it weren't for that, I don't know. I guess they wouldn't be learning anything.
I just want to say I love how the story ended. You haven't seen it yet, but it's. I remember heading into the 10th episode, thinking, "How are we going to wrap this thing up?" I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on here, and I remember you telling me once in a very brief call. I said, "I'm getting there," and then I got it on, under the 44-minute mark, and you crossed all the T's and dotted the I's, and with any good story, you leave a little crack, in my opinion, that allows for other potential possibilities. So.
Well, actually, I don't want to give anything away, but I can just say, I mean, Jason's performance was so filled with humanity. He brought such a humanity to Ted that I wasn't expecting, that it actually changed his arc as a character.
That was the case. I knew it.
You knew it, right? Because there could have been like the snidely, sniveling brother who had a thing against his but Jason, and I knew this. I mean, I had a feeling he was going to, because I was a fan of Ozark, as much as you were. So I was like, we gotta get him, and so and instantly it all just changed. I mean, immediately, because of the humanity he brought to that, which is what it needed. And
we can't talk
really
about
changed how it was going to pan out and everything. So that gives you. I mean, when most of this, by the way, the entire cast is just off the charts. I've never had this before, never. This is a blessing. And so, every single performer was, and, it became intimidating because we had to, there wasn't any little part that I could just say, okay, we'll just write them out. No, they were all so good. And so, they own their characters that we had to really work hard to make sure everybody got their due. So it was both a blessing and a curse.
Well, that has been an amazing conversation. So thank you all so much. Manny, Jason, Sean, this has been fantastic. Once again, Next airs on Tuesdays at 9 p.m. on Fox. And thank you so much for joining me on the Moviemantz Q&A for Next. And until next time, here's looking at you, kid.